Well, hello. Welcome back to another Just 5 Mins. Who knows? It could even be Just 5 Mins this time. Hey, so, MCP. Been talking about it a lot. Model Context Protocol, the universal connector for LLMs, to connect to all sorts of wonderful tools. Goodness me. And, but also the irony, like with anything relatively new, I mean, MCP's only been out for, about a year now, or of the time of this recording, thereabouts. And it's like everything, it's great. It's like a lot of hype, a lot of good stuff when it comes out. But the interesting thing that's been cropping up, as I've been seeing anyway, and reading and researching, is the way that it's brilliant to bolt in all of these MCPs, to MCP to GitHub for, all your Git sort of controls, or into a database, into whatever, whatever the MCP tool is that you're connecting into. So it's brilliant. You just bolt these MCPs in. The LLM, the AI has access to these tools, or sounds great, doesn't it? Hunky-dory, as they would say. Until you realize that the context window. Okay, so that's that thing about how much data you can give an LLM that it can accurately go and do something with. Okay, and all of this is, it depends on your use cases, like everything. But it's the token usage. So I was watching something just recently that had about five or six MCPs, so 5 or 6 different connections into like GitHub and like a database, something else, whatever the other tools were. But interestingly, the guy was using Claude Code with Claude Sonnet 4.5, and the interesting thing was the token usage. I forget how many tokens, but it was in the thousands. Even to discover the tools, it was about 48% of the context window. Why does this matter, and why do you care? Well, maybe you shouldn't worry or care. But interestingly, that's because you're using almost half of your availability up front before it's even done anything. Before you've actually issued a, do this type thing in Claude Code, go and create this, and it works with GitHub and it works with your database and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting thing. So much so that Anthropic, who created the MCP protocol, and obviously Claude as well, they have been addressing this situation recently, as the time of this recording anyway, that it is actually something to be looked at. So the way it's starting to sort of, I don't know, I don't work for Anthropic or anything, but from what I can see in some of the research papers that they're publishing, is to have those MCPs more dynamic, on the fly. So rather than the way that they work at the moment, where you've got all these MCPs and they all initialize and load up when you hit go, as it were, in your chat bot or whatever it is, it's initializing all of those MCP servers using all of those tokens, reducing your context window quite dramatically. But the solution seems to be, where they're going anyway, is like everything. It's funny, isn't it? It's like a reflection of so many other, it's certainly in software, isn't it? The way that, this looks great, let's do that. And then eventually, I think for one thing, it's not even closely related, but it sort of is a similar thing with things like Entity Framework in the .NET world, where if you don't know what Entity Framework is, don't worry. But the point being is, it helped you build software over databases without doing all the nasty, horrible SQL stuff, even though you sometimes do. Anyway, besides the point. Stay focused, David. Okay. And so the idea is, with Entity Framework in the early days anyway, if you had multiple joins across different database tables, and you had this in Entity Framework, you could end up with loading all of this extra data that you didn't need. Okay. And then, finally, with all of these things, and there's loads of, millions of other examples out there, but where it did things like lazy loading. So it only loaded those other child-dependent tables when it really needed to. Okay, so that's the sort of thing, I think, where Anthropic are going with MCP, is to make it a little bit more dynamic on the fly, only when it needs it. So it only loads the tool capabilities when it actually needs it, which does sound a little bit like all of those other things over time in software as well, especially that, you start off with, and it's still a really good solution, MCP, to have this generic way of connecting tools into large language model AI systems. But I think it's like inevitable, isn't it, that these things will evolve because let's face it, all the AI stuff, in 2 or 3 years or whatever, it's rapidly gone haywire, in a good way, in a bad way, but it's inevitable that there's going to be things like these sort of corrections that come into play. So yeah, that's what I've got this time around. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the whole MCP world develops, and certainly it sounds like, as the time of this recording as well, Anthropic are addressing this, where it's got a static load of all these MCP capabilities to make it a bit more real-time and dynamic. So anyway, that's what I've got. So wherever you are, take care. Have a good day, a good week, and I will catch you on the next one.